All right, so let's jump right into it. Today, we've got some fascinating changes happening over at Meta. And we're going to take a deep dive into their global policy team leadership, specifically Nick Clegg stepping down and Joel Kaplan taking over. And this is way more than just like a personnel change.
Mm,
This signals a potential shift in how Meta approaches content moderation, which is a pretty critical issue these days.
absolutely.
And we've got a whole stack of sources here to help us unpack all of this. News articles, opinion pieces, even some chatter from Reddit. We're going to try to get the full picture for you. So, you might be thinking, okay, why is this leadership change such a big deal? Well, just think about it for a second. Meta has billions of users across platforms like Facebook and Instagram. They have a massive influence on how we consume information and engage in, political discourse, even shape our opinions. So when the person in charge of their global policy changes, well, it's worth paying attention to.
For sure.
Search up. So let's start with Nick Clegg. He joined Meta back in 2018 after that whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. Things were pretty shaken up over there. He was tasked with rebuilding trust with governments around the world. And he played a key role in shaping Meta's policies, especially when it comes to AI and online safety.
Yeah, and Clegg, with his center-left political background, often advocated for stronger regulations. He even publicly criticized people like Elon Musk for having what he saw as a hands-off approach to content moderation on platforms like X, formerly Twitter.
Interesting. So fast forward to today, and we've got Joel Kaplan stepping into that role. Now, Kaplan is a pretty prominent figure within the Republican Party. And this shift is happening at an interesting time. With Trump back in the White House, it seems like there's a trend not just at Meta, but across tech. Companies are adjusting their strategies to keep up with this new political climate.
And Kaplan's views on content moderation are pretty different from Clegg's. He's been a strong advocate for less restrictive speech policies, arguing that tighter controls could disproportionately impact conservative voices. He believes in allowing a freer flow of information, even if it means potentially encountering more controversial or even misleading content.
Wow, that's a pretty stark contrast to Clegg's stance, wouldn't you say? It raises some big questions. Could Kaplan's appointment lead to a more relaxed approach to content moderation on Meta's platforms? Are we going to see fewer fact checks or maybe a loosening of restrictions on political advertising?
These are all possibilities worth thinking about. Kaplan's appointment might also signal a shift in how Meta deals with controversial figures. Like, will the decision to ban Trump from Facebook after the January 6th Capitol riot still stand under Kaplan's leadership? These are the kinds of questions that are being debated right now.
Definitely. And it's not just Kaplan. The whole policy team at Meta seems to be leaning in a certain direction. Their new VP of Global Public Policy, Kevin Martin, was appointed to the FCC by George W. Bush. And Jennifer Newstead, their general counsel, served as Trump's top legal advisor at the State Department. It's a trend that's hard to ignore, for sure.
Absolutely. This is creating a lot of buzz, especially among Democrats who've been getting more and more vocal about their concerns with the tech industry and its potential alignment with the new administration.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And one pretty prominent voice expressing those concerns is Eugene Robinson. He's a columnist for The Washington Post, and he wrote this piece. It highlights some potential consequences of this tech-Trump alliance, arguing that it could have a negative impact on everything, from the rule of law to immigration policies, even research funding.
It feels like a real tug of war is happening. You've got those who are advocating for less regulation. They want a more, open and free internet. But on the other side, there's this worry about misinformation spreading unchecked.
Yep.
And the impact that could have on society.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue. There are valid arguments on both sides. It's not so simple as just saying, one approach is right and the other is wrong. It's more about finding a balance, right? How do we protect free speech while making sure online platforms aren't being used to spread harmful content or manipulate public opinion?
That's a great point. You mentioned the potential impact on things like political advertising and how these companies deal with controversial figures. But what about the everyday user experience? What could this change in leadership mean for how we interact with platforms like Facebook and Instagram on a daily basis?
Well, one area we might see a change is in content moderation. Under Kaplan's leadership, Meta might take a more hands-off approach, meaning, fewer posts would get flagged or taken down for violating community guidelines. This could mean we see a wider range of opinions and viewpoints being shared, but it also raises concerns about the potential for more harassment, hate speech, and misinformation.
So it's kind of a trade-off then, a more open platform, but maybe at the risk of encountering more harmful content. What about the algorithms that shape what we see in our feeds? Could those be affected by this leadership change?
That's a really good question. Algorithms have a huge influence on our online experience, right? They determine what posts we see, what ads we're shown, even who we're recommended to connect with. It's definitely possible that Kaplan being in charge could influence how these algorithms are designed and used. It could lead to changes in what content gets prioritized and amplified.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If we zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, this whole shift in Meta's leadership could have effects that go way beyond just their platforms. Remember all that talk about the metaverse, those immersive virtual worlds that Meta's putting so much money into?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The metaverse is being talked about as the next big thing for online interaction. But the rules of the game are still being figured out. Kaplan's views on things like free speech and content moderation could have a big impact on how these virtual spaces are governed. Will they be truly open and unregulated, or will there be some kind of oversight to stop harmful behavior and protect users? Those are questions that need to be answered as the metaverse becomes more mainstream.
It's a whole new world. And it's not just about what's happening here in the US. Meta operates all over the world, and Nick Clegg spent a lot of time building relationships with governments internationally. How do you see Kaplan handling that part of the job?
Well, Clegg's diplomatic approach was important in navigating the world of international regulations and cultural differences. It's hard to say right now if Kaplan will take a similar approach or maybe a more assertive one. It could impact Meta's ability to operate in some countries and could even affect the flow of information across borders.
It seems like there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this leadership change. We've talked about the potential effects on content moderation, the algorithms, the metaverse, even global relations. But with all this speculation, what does it actually mean for us, the users?
At the end of the day, the biggest impact will probably be in how we experience these online platforms. We might see changes in the types of content we come across, how information is shown to us, even the level of control we have over our own online experience. It's definitely a dynamic situation, and it's worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it really makes you think, you know. These platforms, they're not just neutral spaces where we connect and share. They're really powerful tools, shaping how we see the world, and it feels like we're entering a whole new chapter in how they're going to be run.
You know, what's interesting is how the public is reacting to this. We've seen everything from people speculating about what Clegg's going to do next, like maybe going back to UK politics or even starting a podcast, to people straight up criticizing his time at Meta.
Right. Some users feel like he didn't do enough to, control Meta's power, and that others might see Kaplan's appointment as a step in the wrong direction when it comes to responsible content moderation.
It really shows you how tough it is to find that balance between free speech and preventing harm, especially online where things spread so fast.
Sure, sure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. The leadership change, content moderation, the algorithms that shape what we see online, the future of the metaverse, even global relations. It's a lot to take in.
It is, and that's exactly why we wanted to take this deep dive. These aren't just, abstract issues happening in some Silicon Valley boardroom. They affect all of us. They affect how we engage with information and how we connect with each other in this digital age.
That's a great point. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question. What do you think this shift at Meta means for the future of online political discourse? Will we see a more open but potentially more volatile online world? Or will we find new ways to have productive conversations and bridge those divides that seem to dominate so much of our digital lives?
These are questions we all need to think about as we navigate this digital world. The answers aren't easy, but they're important if we want a future where technology helps us connect, understand each other, and move forward together.